Thanks for coming along tonight. I've got 40 minutes max, I think. I could talk for hours, so I'll make sure I stick to 40 minutes or a little bit less. I'm going to say a little bit about my journey into craftivism, but then I'm going to focus on 5 key things of where I think craft can be a really useful tool for activism, which also hints a bit about where it might not be a good tool. Have a manifesto of 10 points at the front you can have a look at, as well as lots of kits and tools so you can physically see it all. But I guess for me, the thing that sort of gets me going and keeps me stitching and keeps me being an activist is that this little message sort of encompasses it for me, which is evil flourishes when good people do nothing, and it's the front of my little book of craftivism. And I think that statement really says a lot to me. Is I think there's some awful things that happen in the world isn't because people decide to do awful things. I don't think that people are innately evil, and most of the stuff in the world that isn't unjust or that does fuel poverty or injustice isn't people proactively doing it. A hell of a lot of it is structures and stigmas that often we just don't engage with, or we don't connect to, or we just don't think that we can do anything. And for me, as a campaigner and working in NGOs for most of my professional life, I know that campaigning can win. And you know, the suffragettes film comes out next month or in a few weeks, and it reminds us that campaigning does win and can turn injustices into long-term change, so that we don't have to keep fundraising or donating or doing emergency issues. We do need to change those root causes of injustice to get women the vote. Or, you know, apartheid, Mandela showed us how you could win that campaign, and Martin Luther King and Gandhi, and there's all these incredible activists throughout history who've changed the world and shaped it into a more beautiful place than it is. And I think that a lot of the harm in the world is stuff that we can change. So we're in this gorgeous place full of clothes, and we know that there's an ugly side of the fashion industry, and we can be part of the problem as well as the solution. So I think for me, that's sort of what motivates me, is we can all improve the world, and we can all do more than sometimes we think we can. And I'm quite stubborn in when I see injustice or poverty. I don't want to just give up and go, well, it'll always be there. I want to try and improve it. And probably the reason for that is this little boy who's 3 with a mullet is me. My mum used to cut my hair when I was little. And this is the front of our local newspaper in Liverpool in the 80s. And it says it's pulpit power, because you can see that we were saving these local family homes. So it says save these houses, has lots of lovely quotes on. And we won the campaign. We were squatting to save local housing from demolition that the council was going to completely demolish, and it would have broken up huge generations of families. I'm from a very low income area in Everton that's still sadly very low income. Grew up in the 80s under a Thatcher government and a militant council, so pretty hard place to grow up. And also in Liverpool, if you said you were from Everton, it wasn't the place that people wanted to go into. So there's a lot of stigma there. But we won saving these local houses because it says pulpit power, because we had both bishops. Liverpool's a bit odd, we have 2 bishops, Catholic and a Protestant. We had both bishops involved. You can see one of them here. Very famous old cricketer, David Shepherd. We had a lawyer who helped give us free advice. We had lots of different members of the community involved, little kids, older people, a huge range. And as a 3-year-old growing up, seeing these houses being saved, and lots of other campaigns around health, unemployment, drugs issues, gang issues, there's still lots of issues that people still campaign on in our area. I could see where campaigns were won and where often good intentions wouldn't turn into successful campaigns, or there were barriers of where even strategic campaigning sometimes wouldn't win. So I grew up in a very low income area, seeing incredibly passionate, powerful, talented, hard-working people not being able to fulfill their potential because of stigma, because of lack of employment, you know, bad education, bad health, lots of reasons that wasn't about their laziness or their issues. The majority of it was about structures that could be changed and should be changed. And then because I grew up basically as an activist, campaigned at school. I was voted head girl in school, which my teachers were not particularly happy with, voted by the pupils though. And we campaigned to win lockers for the school, and we won that because we got the caretaker involved. So all the teachers said, you can't have lockers, it's a health and safety issue. So I spoke to the caretaker and said, is it? And we figured out it wasn't, and we measured all the rooms. So that was how we won that campaign. It was a sneaky, quiet conversation with one man, and then we got a very powerful governor involved who all of the teachers, especially the head teacher, listened to. So I learned a lot from that. We tried to campaign to eradicate gym knickers from the PE kids. If anyone knows, if anyone went to girls' school, these horrific gym knickers our school was in an area where you'd run around outside, and we had curb crawlers in our area because it was a city centre school. Awful, and we run around in gym knickers. Tried to eradicate them from the PE kids, and we lost because we had a very stubborn PE teacher and a few other issues. So I've always learned where campaigning can win and lose, and how do you get around things, and who do you target, who's the most influential, what are the ways to try and engage people. So when I ended up working in NGOs, lots of large international development agencies, and I knew how campaigns could win and lose, but obviously still always learning as well, I felt a little bit doubtful of some of the methods. So I would read lots of these reports from politicians and from businesses, and big reports that charities would pay for, to say what influences politicians and businesses, which campaigns worked for them, which ones didn't, how did we get these important meetings with them, how are we not getting these important meetings. And I would read them all because I'm a big geek and I want to be a good activist and a strategic one. And a lot of it was saying, you know, a lot of these online petitions seem very easy, so how do I know my constituent genuinely cares about the issue? Or all we seem to get is people demonising us, saying we're horrible, so why would we want a meeting with that charity that's telling us that we're horrible human beings? Which is a very human thing to say. So I would read these reports thinking, well, you've got a bit of a point, but then I would go to meetings where it was like, right, we need to do this online petition, and we need to go scream outside with placards outside this company. And it didn't fit with me reading these reports, but it also didn't fit with me thinking about what are my morals and ethics, which are, like I'm sure everyone in the room is, we want to respect everyone and treat them how we want to be treated. We want our values to be threaded through what we do. And for me, you know, I want the world to be beautiful, kind and just. And I felt like my activism wasn't beautiful, wasn't very kind, and actually wasn't very just, because we weren't having equality within power, we were just fighting between who has the power. So it felt quite uncomfortable. And I'm an introvert, so there's lots of these elements come together, which means that as an activist, you know, you tend to go to a huge amount of meetings. You're often on marches a lot of the time with lots of people. Most activism is with people, or it's quick, easy collectivism or slacktivism. And I was burning out as an activism. My job was engaging people in campaigning, and then my personal life was joining lots of groups, and it was completely exhausting. And also I was doing so many things I wasn't thinking about it. So I ended up completely burning out and thinking, maybe clearly I don't fit into the activist mould. I also don't ride a bike, so you get lots of activists go and ride their bikes off into the sunset to get somewhere, and I get the bus and meet them later and miss out on it all. And I love fashion, and there was a lot of issues around, are you allowed to love fashion if you know want the world to be pure, and I don't agree with sabotage. There was a lot of issues that I didn't really feel like I fitted into. And it all culminated in this thing of, can I be an activist anymore, or do I need to get another job, or do I need to give it up and let people who fit that mould be it? But I'm extremely stubborn, so I decided, no, I'm going to keep going. And the reason is also because at a similar time, this is my craft box, which is an old toolbox, because I secretly want to be a carpenter as well. It's really rusty, it's really older. I got into cross-stitch and hand embroidery because I was travelling across the country when I used to work for Difford, and I had to travel all over the UK. And like lots of people know, on Pendolino trains they tilt, don't they? And I'd get a bit seasick. So if I was reading or emailing, I'd feel really ill. So, and I also, as the creative beings that we are, I was getting really itchy fingers because nearly all of my work was online, tapping away, or on your thumbs, or a lot of it wasn't making things. And if you're feeling very disempowered about whether you can make a difference in the world, which is how I felt, to be able to physically stitch stuff, I really felt like the urge to do it as a human instinct. So I picked up a cross stitch kit, very ugly little teddy cross stitch. I don't even know who I was going to make it for. It was really old. It was about 5 or 6 years ago, so before you got really cool kits like you can get now. And I started stitching on the Traid because I had that urge to make something, and I was feeling very burnt out and just a bit worried. And I immediately noticed lots of elements where I thought, hang on a minute, this could tackle some of the concerns and problems I had with activism, which is the 5 quick things I'm going to run through with you guys. And the first one, which Ryla hinted at, was, for me, it's slow activism. You know, like I've said, a lot of activism you think about is very fast. It's going on marches, it's holding a placard, it's signing a petition, it's lots of quick transactions. And it often didn't give us time to really think deeply about the issues and about the complexities of injustice. There often isn't a quick, easy answer, and if there was, hopefully we would have fixed it by now. Everything's intertwined, so you look at the fashion industry and it's not just sweatshops, it's also water consumption, it's also, you know, fast fashion, all of those things, you know, from just, you know, looking at some of the posters in this room. It's very complex, so to just say to someone, sign this petition and everything will be fine, I felt like I was stunting people's growth, and I also wasn't engaging deeply with what I could do. Which really, craft is such a great form to do this very repetitive hand action. So I don't do machine embroidery, everything I do is hand stitch, so you have that repetitive hand action. And I've been lucky over the years that I've worked with a few neuroscientists and clinicians on a project which was fascinating. All about that repetitive hand action can slow you down, help you think more critically, give you more focus. If you're extremely angry about an injustice, our human instinct is fight or flight. So our brain sort of switches off and our body goes, am I going to run away or am I going to fight? So to really have the clarity to look through these complicated issues, the stitching really helps with that because it does force you to slow down. And because of that slow therapeutic nature, it also means it's really mindful. So as soon as you start stitching, you notice if you've got shallow breath. You notice if you're trying to pull the thread too fast because your hands are shaking or you're in a bit of an impatient rush or feeling stressed. You can't thread a needle if you're not focused and calm. You know, you'll make a mess or you'll make a knot. So it really makes you very mindful of how you're feeling, if you're burnt out, if you're doing things without thinking about it, if you're angry, which is really important for any issue. We need to think about how are we doing to then do what we need to do, otherwise we lash out and it doesn't help anyone. And again, it's not very strategic. But also it's mindful because while you're stitching, again, nearly all of my stuff is text-based, so we don't do knitting, yarn bombing like lots of people think. It's very small and it's text-based, so you pick what message you're going to stitch, and you're not going to stitch something you don't believe in. So you really take ownership of what you're stitching. You reread it so you don't make a spelling mistake. You stitch over it, and the point of it is you think very deeply about what's this message I'm stitching. So on our footprints, for example, you stitch a message about what journey am I on as a good global citizen, how am I using my gifts and passions and habits to make a positive impact on the world and not a negative one. What journey am I on, and am I being distracted by lots of other things? And you keep it in your house or on your desk at work or somewhere to remind you to not be on automatic pilot and remind you to think about every step we take does have an impact. And we can't be completely pure, but we can try and live as intentionally as possible and think critically about what we buy, how we treat people, what we're doing that day. Are we being mindful of whether we're taking time out to reflect and rest? Are we trying to do too much? Or are we being distracted by lots of things so we don't have to have those difficult discussions or questions? And all of our kits have little crafter thoughts in. So if your brain starts wandering off, which a lot of craft people love that because it is a nice distraction, but all of our stuff is craftivism, so the point is the activism. So we have little questions for people to think about while they're stitching. And because stitching is such a therapeutic and very calming and comforting tool, and it's physical and tactile and soft, it means that we can ask ourselves difficult questions like, am I having a positive impact on the world? And where I'm not, can I improve on that? Or have I been ignoring it because it feels a bit stressful or I don't want to think about it? Or how do I engage in that issue where at the moment I'm part of the big problem? How can I lessen that or even challenge some of that? And because it is very comforting, it does help with that critical thinking and that mindfulness to think, what am I doing as an activist? Is it good, or am I just doing and not thinking through it? So the slow and the mindful activism, I think without stitching, and the clinicians and the art therapists I speak to who've done lots of case studies on this say that craft is an incredibly powerful tool for that repetitive action to do that slowing down and that mindfulness and that critical thinking. You'll tell from all of my little titles that all of my stuff is like against certain forms of activism. So we try and do quiet activism because if you're like me, really loud activism makes me just not want to hear it. Like, I'm really stubborn, so if I see like, you know, a big demonstration on the street outside an embassy or something, my immediate human instinct, I haven't even looked at it, my immediate thought is, oh, this is really loud, I want to be somewhere quiet, what's happening? Or I get quite scared. And even if I agree with what they're saying and I'm secretly like, yay, that's brilliant, I get quite nervous to go up and ask them about it because it can be quite aggressive or people talk at you, or I'm just tired, and sometimes you're just too tired to absorb it, which is not good, and I know my faults. But I do think we also, within the activism toolkits, like my little sewing box before, I do think that we should have, not replace other forms of activism, because loud activism is really important, but I also think that there should be other forms within the toolbox. So we should have slow and mindful and quiet activism in the toolbox, so when we look at a campaign and say, what do we need for it, we can pick what's relevant. And again, for me, as an introvert and as someone who felt burnt out from doing traditional activism, that quiet form I felt was really powerful, and this is one of our workshops I did in Bristol. And what was amazing is people do naturally quieten down, so because you're focusing on what you're doing, but also because you don't need eye contact. Lack of eye contact is an incredibly good tool for rehabilitation and for thinking things through and creating a safe space, because so when it comes to injustice issues, you don't have to talk in a meeting. So if you think of most activism meetings, often you get the same type of confident people who talk, and you get lots of shy people who don't talk but might have something really important to say. Or you have no silence where people reflect and think, because everyone, and I do it all the time, you feel that uncomfortable silence and you feel like you've got to fill it. So actually, in terms of engaging deeply and thinking strategically, it's not always the best place to sit in a formal meeting unless you've done lots of preparation before, which often we don't do because we meet every month or every 2 weeks, or it's not very effective. So to do some craft, some handicraft with people, and do it with nice instrumental music in the back. So often I'll have Chili Gonzalez or a bit of Mogwai or a bit of Philip Glass, very chilled out, but creates this safe space where people can stitch with each other. If you're not feeling, if you don't like someone next to you, but you can see they're struggling, again, we want to help people whether we agree or not with them. So it's really good for diverse audiences, or to help with, you know, conflict resolution in a small community way. But also it means people can listen without feeling like they've got to say something. So for introverts, it's really important, because a lot of group meetings they feel like they can't go to because they're too shy and they don't know what to say, or they're just tired because being around so many people drains them of energy. So I want to make sure activism fits lots of different people and not just one particular type. And also it means that while you're listening, you can say stuff that you wouldn't normally say if you had to give eye contact. So if someone says something and you're stitching away, you can say, oh, I'm not sure about that, can you say it a bit more? Or that reminds me of this. But you don't have to look them in the eye and say, I disagree with you, which I would be too scared to do most of the time. You can just say, well, that makes me think about this. And there's lots of evidence from clinicians, again, of different groups where they've opened up much more. Because it's slow, you can spend hours stitching and thinking and say a few things, or say a lot of things. All of our workshops are a minimum of an hour, often they're 3 hours, and still we have to kick people out because they get settled and really want to discuss stuff, but in a thoughtful, quiet, safe space. And you can see, you know, some of these people are talking, some of them are just sitting and listening, and it means it's got that space where you don't have to fill the silence. You can just sit and stitch and think. And it also means quite loud. People tend to moderate themselves a bit more because they can hear themselves talking too much, so they're a bit more mindful of that. So it does create a really interesting space for those discussions, which we need to do before we find out what we're doing. The fourth element for me is that I think activism is often not very gentle. So we're in Red magazine as the gentle activist, and Lana's just called gentle protest. And I just had an exhibition in Stockholm called Gentle Protest, so you can have a look on Instagram at what it was. But for me, again, coming back to that point of wanting the world to be beautiful, kind and just, a lot of the lobbying that I was doing with politicians or businesses, with charities or with independent activist groups, we were pinpointing who the target was, which is important, but we were often picking one person and then just pouncing on them. So whether it was Twitter storm saying you're awful at the same time, whether it was standing outside a particular shop or an embassy or outside Parliament for a particular person to come out. And if anything, a lot of the stuff I was seeing was that it just made them more and more angry, and more, either they'd say, all right, you might have a point, but then they'd come back more angry. And it's what we do as humans, isn't it? If someone screams at us, we don't listen, because even if they're right, we're stubborn, you know, it's quite aggressive. So again, our brains tend to shut off. And often if we do that, all we're doing is fighting. So, you know, the person with the most power wins, but then the organisation or the person comes back even stronger because you've annoyed them so much and you've made them feel so small and devalued and horrible that they're not going to want to be part of your gang or work with you. And I felt like, you know, what are we doing? This isn't very good. And I felt like there's a way to, surely there's a different way to do this. And actually we need to work with people that we don't agree with or we have different ideologies with. And what I think is really clever with mums, and I remember my mum doing this, was when she wouldn't scream at me, but when she'd say, not angry, just disappointed. And you'd immediately go, oh, because she was basically saying, I believe you could be better at this. I believe that you're a brilliant person, but you've done something wrong. I'm not going to tell you what it is sometimes, but you're going to figure it out, and I believe you could be better at it. So it was always much more hurtful than if she screamed at me and I'd just be like, oh, you're horrible, I hate you. It was a really powerful tool. And I was emailing my politician at the time, a few years ago, like a traditional activist in lots of ways. I was sending in lots of petitions online. I'd often add in a bit more things. It wasn't complete slacktivism, but a little bit. I was sending in petition cards that I'd get. I met her once in a group, but I was too nervous to say anything really because there was a few of us. And I got an email back from her office telling me to stop contacting her. And I really wasn't sending that many things, I promise. It was after a few months and they said, it's a waste of your time, it's a waste of our time, and it's a waste of charity's money. Stop contacting us, we're not going to do anything that you say. Which I thought, one, you're my MP and you're supposed to represent me, and I'm a constituent, so this is not going to make me want to vote for you ever. And you just made me so angry. And I thought for quite a few days of how dare she, what am I going to do, this is awful, knowing that, you know, politicians do have impact locally and nationally. But I thought for quite a while, and I thought, okay, so I don't know her, she doesn't know me. Clearly from the petitions I was sending her, it was all stuff she was voting against. So strategically from her side and her officer's side, it was thinking, well, she's not going to vote for us, it's different ideology, what's the point, we'll just tell her to stop doing it. So I thought, okay, so she doesn't know I genuinely care about these issues. So it was lots of stuff on climate change, tax avoidance, stuff on living wage, and for me it all fits under inequality and under that umbrella, and I think they mean a lot to me and all fit together. But she might have thought that I was just being a bit of a robot for different charities. So I thought, right, what am I going to do? I'm going to embroider a handkerchief. I only thought that because I had a pack of handkerchiefs from an old lady, and I thought, oh, I'll give these to charity because I don't need them, I've got my hanky. And I thought about them, I thought, blow it, blow in your nose, don't blow it. I knew craft could be a really lovely tool as a gift to give people, and I thought, hang on a minute, I could use this hanky to write a message on to my MP saying don't blow it, use your power and influence for good, and give it to her to say I really care and I want us to work together. I don't want to be completely against you. I'm not that type of person. I do think that we can work together even if we disagree. So I hand wrote a little message, so dear my MP, and I put, I know being a politician is a big and a tough job, but don't blow it in capital letters, but everything else was handwritten. And I backstitched over the top of it. I said, don't blow it. Really hope that you use your power and influence to help the most vulnerable people in the world and help eradicate poverty. Yours in hope, Sarah, with my surname and my postcode, so she knows constituent. And I just did a backstitch over it, which for me gave me lots of time from going to being extremely angry and calling their names in my head, which were not very nice, to stitching for a long time thinking, okay, so she doesn't know me, so when I meet her, what am I going to say? How am I going to show that I want to work with her where possible? What she, what campaigns does she work on? What's she passionate about? It gave me enough time to think and prepare myself as much as possible. I asked to meet her, which she has to do because I was a constituent, so I got up early on a Saturday morning for my appointment in the local library. And I didn't go in with a campaign briefing or a poster for her to hold up or a thing to say, vote on this now. None of that transactional stuff, which can make you feel a bit used, even if you're an MP and you represent people. It's still, it's a lot for them to have constantly people saying, do this, do this. So I went in with my hanky, which was like this. You can see it's backstitched, a little message on. And I just went in with it in my pocket, screwed up, and went, hi Jane, you don't know me, but I've made you this handkerchief. And I gave it to her, and she immediately went from being quite cold to completely confused to looking on the back, which made me think she was a secret crafter, and seeing that it was a bit messy, it wasn't perfect, it was a bit wobbly. And I said, we don't know each other, you're new to being an MP and to our area. What can I do to help? Why did you become an MP? She told me you used to work for John Lewis, and now I always talk about how good cooperatives are. You know that, Jane, you used to work for one. Let's support them all around the world, not just here. I talk about all of that. She talked about a lot of the work she was doing that she wasn't telling people because it was quite sensitive issues, because we gained trust with each other, and she saw that I didn't want to manipulate her. But I also said to her, you're voting on things that I don't agree with. Tell me why. Why did you vote on them? Because it might be that you can change my mind, or I can understand it a bit more, that you have to compromise in this way, but what about this? So over the years, this one little hanky that her office pinned on the board as a little reminder really helped me build a relationship with her, really helped her see that I wasn't trying to trap her, I wasn't trying to be more powerful than her and belittle her. I genuinely wanted to work with her where possible. She knew that, which she didn't know before, that I worked with women's institutes and lots of groups that is useful for her to get messages out there, and we could do some media in the local area about different issues that we agreed with but some of her party members didn't. So it was a real way of not being aggressive enemies but actually being quite useful critical friends. I learned a huge amount, and what some of the issues she had to deal with and how she had to negotiate and compromise sometimes, or where her thinking was, which is still very different to my thinking, but at least I understand and I empathise a little bit more with her. But it was a much better way of being a lobbyist, I thought, and I think without this little handkerchief as a catalyst for building those relationships and a physical thing to keep going back to her about, and being known as the hanky girl, which wasn't really, what I was going for, but you do it for the cause. But this little bit of craft with the text on that's a timeless, encouraging message saying, I want you to do the best job you can, how can I help, was much gentler and a much better way. I thought that we should protest. And leading on that, the pretty protesting is the same thing, that gentle activism. I hinted before that I get quite nervous of protests, and I also think often it encourages people who agree with you, but people who disagree, they're not likely to come up to you and say, I'm not quite sure I agree, could you tell me more about that, unless someone is wanting to scream at you and you just shout at each other. So my response to that really was to do protests as pretty as possible, to the point where it's overly kitsch, really. So I tend to wear lots of monochrome, but whenever we do pretty protests, and we call them stitch-ins as well, I always wear as much colour as I can get. And this is one that we did outside Marks and Spencer's to try and get them to pay the living wage. And we had people in Marks and Spencer's clothes who were Marks and Spencer's fans, so that Marks and Spencer's staff and managers could see that we're their customers, which they should want to please, rather than people that don't shop from them. So it was a bit of a power strategy there. We had lots of women, but we had men as well. And we had these, you know, 2 women who came with their kids. You know, I don't know whether they would have come to a demonstration outside a place with placards and megaphones, to be honest, but they came and they were asking us what's happening. And we could have really long conversations with people. So often, again, because it's nervous, creative, introvert people or burnt out activists who tend to join in the Craftivist Collective, we get people who are quite nervous to say stuff. So I could say, well, don't worry, just sit there and stitch. And if someone asks you, you know what to say. But it meant that people who weren't extrovert or performers could feel confident to come along. But it also meant, because we had bunting up, because we had tea and cakes and biscuits down here, we could offer them to people if people wanted them. It meant that we could just sit and stitch quite quietly, and people would say to us, what are you doing? And because people initiate the conversation themselves, they're much more open to hearing the answer than if we say, do you want to ask us what we're doing? It's really important. People tend to go, I'm a bit busy and you're invading my space. So it's a very intriguing way to try and get people have those conversations with us, but always trying to be positive. So we'd say, you know, we love Marks and Spencer's, it's got such a history in the UK, but isn't it crazy that they've made all this profit last year and their chairman gets millions of pounds as a wage and they don't pay the living wage? And people would be shocked, and we'd have these conversations about M&S could be amazing and pay the living wage, and we love their, you know, the customer service is brilliant, so we should give them a living wage. And we could have these lovely empowering conversations with people going, yeah, let's do this, rather than this is awful, which just makes our brain look at the awful thing rather than figuring out how to get past it. So there's lots of psychology behind it as well. If you strive for something, your brain figures out how to get there. If you just wallow in something, your brain focuses on it. So I love chocolate too much. If I just say don't eat chocolate, what am I thinking of? Chocolate. If I say I'm going to be really happy and healthy, my brain sort of says chocolate isn't on that list, so we'll ignore it. So there's lots of that around it as well. And the last of the 5 reasons I think craft can be really powerful is to intrigue people. So again, you know, it can be pretty, it's great for the maker to use for that deep engagement, but also you don't expect it. And again, all my stuff is small, so I always talk about being small and beautiful rather than big and brash. So these little banners are about this size, you can see it there, all about this size. They're all donated fabric, so we try and upcycle as much as possible and get all the thread made in the UK. And we'll put intriguing messages on, so it won't say no sweatshops, because again your brain just goes, oh, no sweatshops, okay, walks off and forgets about it. It'll be a fact or a quote or a question or a statement where it forces the reader to think about it more themselves. So it intrigues you much more, which means it stays much more deeper in your brain, because your brain's going, well, what do I do with this? What does it mean? So this is one that we put inside Somerset House during London Fashion Week a couple of years ago, and sadly I think the quote's still relevant. And what does that say about the fashion industry? So it's really trying to get people to question things. We have our little label on it so people can Google for more information in their own time to find out more. It's in the space relevant to the issue, so walkers, passers-by can see it, but also we take a good picture, so I'll always have a good photographer with me to take the picture. And we both get really nervous putting them up, but we know if we've got a good picture, people share them online. You know, people I've spoke to say they're much more likely to share something like this on Facebook or Pinterest or Instagram than some harrowing picture of something saying do this, because their friends will roll their eyes or they don't want to upset people's days, but they do want people to question things and be curious and say, why are these clothes so cheap, or why is this so rich, and what's happening here? So it's really trying to, again, look at that activism toolbox and say, are we being intriguing and getting people to think for themselves? Often we're not as activists, and we should have some elements to do that. So it's a really good offline way for people to feel like they've got a voice and to stitch it and think about the issues. But also it's quite a useful online tool as well, because people don't expect such a cute little pretty thing to have quite a hard statement inside, so it makes it a bit more gentle. And these are some other images. So we'll do jigsaw pieces where everyone's a piece of the solution. So we're not having messiah complexes for people, but we're saying we can all be a piece of the solution. Let's make a jigsaw piece about it. And we had it installed in different places around the UK. Or we might cross-stitch a chair so that whoever sits on the chair goes, yeah, it is easy to sit up and take notice because I can Google a lot now. but it is difficult to get up and take action. So it's a little gentle nudge and reminder to say, yes, we can see what's going on, but we also need to stand up and do stuff and not just see it. Or I might put something around gender inequality, where there might be gangs like these guys and girls hanging out where I wasn't comfortable with the power dynamic. And by putting it up, I had a chat with these two guys who were like, what are you doing? And I could say, well, I put it up here because you guys are hanging out here, your girlfriends don't seem to say anything, and you're quite, you know, manly, and do you feel like you've got to protect them, or do you see your girlfriends as your best mates, or do you feel like you've got to be this man and they've got to be the pretty ones? And I said, I really love this quote, so I hope you don't mind me putting it up. And we had a lovely chat, you know, they were like, yeah, maybe I do think I should be this. And, you know, one of them was like, yeah, she's my best mate. And I was like, oh, that's lovely. He was like, yeah. So they let me put it up, and they said they'll protect it and keep it for me there. But the image has been used in magazines and in books and things. So because it's intriguing, it means it does reach out the activism bubble, which again for me, I'm passionate about not seeing activism as an option, an opt-in to do once in a while, but to really see where everything we do has an impact and thread our values through everything we do. So we get into craft magazines where you wouldn't normally get an activism issue, or a fashion magazine around the world, or different books where you wouldn't expect activism because the craft is involved. And it also means that we can get our little, like my suitcase over there, my little products out into craft shops and independent shops and gallery shops. So people are looking at different gifts for Christmas for people or presents and can go, oh, hadn't thought about activism and craft, but this could be a really gentle way to get my daughter to think through stuff, or my friend to think through stuff, but in a gentle, loving way. So they're all our little tools. And the last couple of slides are really just to remind you that for me, craftivism isn't going to save the world on its own, but it should be a useful part of the activism toolkit. I always say that craft shouldn't be our taskmaster, it should be our tool. So if we love craft, we could easily try and shoehorn it into things, which might not always be that useful. So if we want to make lots of teddies for poor people somewhere, you know, it can be quite detrimental. Or if we want to make lots of blankets for the homeless, we need to ask those homeless people if they want it, or if it's dignified, or if it's needed. So we really need to challenge ourselves. But it is about becoming who we are, and craft can slow us down and help us figure that out and live more intentionally. It can help us think, where can we use our gifts and talents? What gives me energy? What drains me of energy? Where can I be a useful, effective person so that you can become the change you wish to see in the world? I think I've gone over loads. So final one is just to say, as you can tell, I've got loads to say, but the main thing is to get loads of stitching done. And our current project we've just done with Molly Makes, which is until the 12th of December, is wearing your heart on your sleeve, so either here or the bottom of your sleeve. But it's about what do you love and how global warming, whether we like it or not, will affect it. So I love to craft, it will affect that. People love, you know, their grandchildren. I love bugs as well. Climate change affects everything. So we're putting our heart on our sleeve, saying that we really care about this issue, and we want to take as many pictures of people around the world wearing their heart on the sleeve to join the climate coalition and join the climate global movement, so that world leaders in November and December who are meeting in Paris can see that people all over the world of very different backgrounds and different places are joining in to say, we want you to put your heart on your sleeve and do what you can to put forth a really good agreement to tackle climate change. And it's a lovely, lovely, pretty way to engage them. And there's an extremely high up, influential woman who I've just been asked to make a heart on a sleeve for her, which I'm going to put a poem on the back that we found out is on her fridge. I'm not stalking her, I promise. But someone said this is a really powerful woman and she's going to be in London, and someone knows her who knows her and said we need to keep encouraging her, so we're going to make her one as well, and some other people. And I've made them for people like Stephen Fry and places. You can see a little green heart for the Climate Coalition. But we're really keen to get hundreds and thousands and millions of hearts on people's sleeves, and people to see them and go, what are you wearing? And then you could say, well, the conference is in December in Paris, we've got to do stuff. I love crafting, what do you love? And really get those conversations happening where you wouldn't normally expect them, to say to people, what are you going to do on climate change? And let's also engage our world leaders to do stuff top down and we do stuff bottom up. So if you can come along, it's on the 29th of October in the Shepherd's Bush Traid, and we'll email you all with the details. But it should be a really nice way to chat and think and not just hear me rambling at you. But I'm glad you're still awake. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. Time went very quickly, and those 5 types of activism, I don't know if I'll remember them all, but I think what really stayed with me was the process that you're going through, how strategic it is, how thoughtful it is, and how we should take those messages into all the things that we're doing every day anyway. As we make decisions, how can we be more calm, gentle, thoughtful and mindful when we make them? Does anybody have any questions? Because we have 15 minutes or so for questions.
Or disagreements?
Or disagreements.
Or comments?
I have a question. When you're sort of putting things on fences or poles or anything, like, do you ever feel scared about doing that, or people ripping them off? Or just
I get so worried about everything. There's a lovely quote about be a warrior, not a worrier. And most of my friends who are street artists, one of their motivations is the risk and the, potential illegal stuff of doing it, like really gets them going. It scares the crap out of me. I'm such a goody two-shoes. But because they're small and I always hang them off eye level, so again it's not saying look at me, but people are excited to find them. So normally you can just do it like this. So I was in Stockholm a couple of weeks ago and I put one near the culture centre about xenophobia, and I just did it like this. I was watching a man looking at me and I was thinking, what's he going to say? Is he going to stop me? I was getting really worried. But because it's little and fabric, it's fine. It's not sabotage. It's not illegal, apart from it being rubbishing. And I've had a policeman say before, what are you doing? And I've just gone, I'm just taking a picture and then I'm going to cut it down. And they've watched me cut it down. So it's not too scary, but it is, I still find it quite scary to do. But it shouldn't stop you doing it. And if you care about the issue, it keeps you doing it. So you should do one if you're scared of doing it. Put it up. You can do it. And then you feel proud that you've done it and it's an important thing. And then take a sneaky picture. Yeah, but it is scary. I get scared of everything.
I was just going to say, in the news I saw recently, like Lidl,
yes.
they got the living wage.
Yeah, they're implementing the real living wage, not George Osborne's living wage, which isn't a living wage.
So do you think that's a positive thing, and do you think it's going to make the likes of M&S and other big companies?
I think it's a brilliant thing. We should all be paying the living wage, and the fact that they did it, IKEA have just done it now. We were telling Marks and Spencer's to do it because they're really influential for other companies. So if they did it, it could be a domino effect. We made handkerchiefs for all the board members to encourage them to do it, and because all 14 of us have tried to keep a relationship with them, it means that when Lidl did it, we all said we've got to email our hanky board member and say, have you noticed Lidl have just done this? You're not going to be the first one to do it, bad PR, but you could do some really good stuff and implement it as well. So the hope is, and I was tweeting M&S and my hanky person saying, isn't this great? Hoping for a bit of a response. But we're having a meeting with them soon, so fingers crossed. But yeah, it definitely helps. Because you've got no excuse then. It's like if they can do it and not go bankrupt, what's your excuse? Yeah. Yeah, we need to keep banging on about the living wage. Definitely. I've got my little suitcase of tricks. So feel free to have a rummage without it toppling over. I don't think it will, but do have a look at them, because whenever I do these talks, the hope is that it inspires people, but it also empowers people to go, right, I'll have a go and see if it helps. So I hope it's given you some practical tips.
I attended one of your workshops doing the Changemakers. Could you tell us a bit more about your Changemakers project?
Oh yeah. There's 5 different ones, so 3 women, 2 men, just to balance it out a little bit. And again, this is more that inner activism, so it's a dot to dot. It's all letterpressed by an old man called Dave in Bristol, and it's all on offcuts of cards from Germany, so as ethical as we could make it. And the point of it is it's one line, and you stitch these change makers. You read a bit about them on the back, you pick the one that resonates with you, and you think about, well, how have they changed the world and what values have they put into their work? and how are my values put in my work. And because it's repetitive, it does make you think. So like, this is Eleanor Roosevelt, who was a notorious introvert and happened to be the president's wife and did amazing things, and you can read about her and say, okay, well, what values did she put, what she did, what challenges did she have, what opportunities and talents did she have, and how did she be the change maker that she is, and what can I learn from that, and maybe I could be a change maker too. And then you keep it, and they've all got lovely quotes, and you keep it somewhere as a little reminder to sort of keep you going. But it's a nice little one to do with kids as well, or it's a quick one to do on the bus, and people might ask what you're doing and you can talk about it. But it's all letterpress by Dave, and we've got a lovely video of Dave like overseeing what we're doing, which is cute. So yeah, have a look at them as well.
Okay, so there's lots of things at the back to go and have a look at and pick up on your way out. We also have a late night in Dalston here tomorrow, so come back, and all the wonderful clothes that you see around you will be for sale, and there's a DJ here and a knitwear workshop to pop in on. And then we have another late night, which is what Sarah will be doing her event at. So if you're really interested and you definitely want to book a space, I recommend coming to the front and putting your name down so that you'll get a message. Yeah,
because it's limited.
It is limited. We can only take a maximum of 10 in each session. We're doing 3 sessions through the night. So do come along and book your place if you know you're interested, and we'll send you an email sharing with you how to book, so you can share that with your friends and family as well.
And it'll be really chilled and lovely.
It will be lovely.
Oh well.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good rest of your day.